Hello, and welcome to RRI Explained, a ResBIOS podcast. It is the aim of the ResBIOS project to embed responsible research and innovation, or RRI, into 4 universities across Europe, in the hope of improving the interconnectivity between science research and society, with a particular focus on the biosciences. But what is RRI exactly? Well, hopefully we can find out together. Today we're joined by Nicola Quadri, who will speak to us today more about the Time for CS project, as well as some of the benefits and challenges of using citizen science and how partners work together to implement these initiatives. Thank you for joining us today, Nicola. I was just wondering if you could briefly give an introduction for the Time for CS project and the work that you do within it.
Thank you for inviting us here to talk about Time for CS. Time for CS is a project which has a main goal, which is to bring institutional change within the partners of the project, and especially within the so-called implementers, because in the consortium of Time for CS, there are basically 2 types of institutions. There are front runners, which have a long history and experience in citizen science, like UCL, for example. And then you have implementers that are institutions, research institutions, and universities that have very few experience in citizen science, as Università Vita Salute San Raffaele, and more broadly, the San Raffaele research community, which we tried to get involved exactly by being part of this project. And the goal of the project is essentially to build up an infrastructure within the institution, the implementers, so that the research community will be more will have the tools to start doing citizen science. So that means basically to train them, explain what citizen science is, and give all the support, both from the point of view of regulations, from the point of view of technical assets, in order to make them able to engage citizens in science.
So you're one of the implementing partners for San Raffaele University. How have you been trying to get the researchers from your institute to involved with the Time for CS project and the citizen science projects in general?
So actually engaging our research community is one of the most complex part of the project, because San Raffaele University and Ospedale San Raffaele do research in a strictly collaborative way. So we have pretty much 100 laboratories that do basic research in many areas, such as oncology, immunology, infectious diseases. And then we have the clinical research. So you have this broad spectrum, both in terms of scientific fields and in terms of type of research, basic, translational, and clinical. And it's an area which is biomedicine, where citizen science is even more complex than it is in other scientific fields. And it has come into these fields actually later. So one of the problems we have, and the project, it's all about that in some sense, is how to engage our researchers and how to make them willing to do this activity, which is to engage really citizens and patients in the research activity, which is a challenge for them. So it's not easy. And for these first months, what we have done is to collect information, because we actually don't have all the information about what has already been done in San Raffaele in terms of engaging patients and citizens, because we don't have all the information we need. And we discovered by doing a survey that actually many researchers has done things similar to citizen science, but also we discovered that many of them do not know what citizen science is. And the next steps, which actually we already started, is to engage them in events, informational and also formative events, to raise awareness on citizen science, why they should be interested, and how they can do citizen science in their specific area of interest, which is a very complex task.
So that's quite interesting. You're talking about some of the researchers already doing some activities which are kind of closely connected to citizen science, but perhaps weren't really within the strict framework, whereas Some others were more informed about the topic and some were less. I don't know, what bit of a two-parter question, really. So what are the projects so far that the researchers have found that they've been able to kind of integrate into the citizen science framework? And has there been any, I don't know, friction between the researchers and getting involved with the citizen science programs, perhaps?
So I think that the main difference between what has already been done and what we want to achieve is that we already have some researchers, mostly clinical researchers, that engaged patients and healthy subjects in new ways into their research, making them more active participants. But still, they are not as independent as you would like to have them in a citizen science project, because citizen science has this idea that you should, so citizens that can also be patients, obviously, when we are talking about biomedical research, should be involved in the collection of data or in the data analysis, in writing the paper that will come out from the research, or at the beginning in designing the study, its objectives, for example. And we have some experiments in doing this in our institution, but they're very weak forms, I would say, of citizen science, and we would like to give them the tools to do it better.
It's interesting that you say that you want to move beyond patients and participants being just the subject, the people that are being kind of tested on as patients of the medical research, but also becoming greater parts of the project as either with data collection or with the project planning. I'm wondering if you could give any more kind of specific examples that you've been doing so far.
For example, we discovered that we have a research center which works on the use of IT in health. This is one of the examples of the broad spectrum of research that is actually carried out in the institution. And they did some projects, actually European projects, and they designed an app to collect data on the diabetes patients and to engage them in deciding the diet and some of the activities that will help them feel better and be better. Or another example, we have pancreas surgeons that are working with a new app that is meant to collect data from patients about the quality of their life, so that they have more information that actually deal with very different kind of activities, so that relate to their life, like sex life and like what they eat, their diet, pretty much everything that it's about their daily life after the intervention, so that they can have more information to process and to understand if what they're doing is correct, or can be made better. And these are just examples. And in both cases, our researchers used IT smartphone apps to collect this data and to engage subjects. So, and this is actually a key point of citizen science, and because obviously the way you can engage citizens in research is mostly mediated by information technology. And now that we have smartphones, we have apps, it's even easier, obviously, to do that. And maybe citizen science also in astronomy or in other areas such as ecology do that exactly by using smartphone apps.
I suppose it kind of makes this seamless. It makes it more seamless kind of as a way of getting people involved and integrated into the research. If they just have to use this thing that everyone's got in their pockets, download an app, and they can be contributing pretty easily to your information gathering.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's very powerful in the biomedical area because it's not very used, actually. And it is essential because patients have information and knowledge that physicians and biomedical researchers don't have. So if you are able to get them involved, to get them provide you this information, you will do better research, you will improve your tools and treatments faster. So I think it's something very powerful that still has to be harnessed in the proper way.
This might be a bit of a rudimental question, so I just hope you don't mind if it's, you've already mentioned it, I just wanted to clarify. most of the people that are involved in your citizen science projects, are they mostly patients, or are they other people from wider society?
No, actually, most of the projects that we already have or that were done in the past deal with patients. But we have few examples also of projects that are meant to engage citizens at large. We have a huge hospital, which almost 500,000 patients per year. And in the campus, there are a supermarket and shops and many, there's like a small city, I would say very small, but with many different activities. And obviously, not only patients move here, but also relatives and people just coming to see patients. And the research center I was mentioning before, the one about the use of IT in health, actually carried out some projects in which they were using apps to understand what people were buying inside the supermarket and what kind of food and stuff they were buying, and to map them to data about health. And they've been doing that because the framework helped that. And at the time, I don't think there were smartphones, so it was done here specifically because they have the infrastructure here. Obviously now it's a bit different, but that is an example of a project that actually was collecting data from people moving inside the hospital, and this data were used to understand the relationship between diet and health. There are other experiments, I would say, but most of them are related to patients.
Mm-hmm. Especially with health science, I suppose, and healthcare and the research that you do at your institute. Yeah, the interconnection between citizens and health there's just a very large overlap there. So I imagine getting kind of citizens' involvement and citizen kind of engagement to prove these areas is very important.
Yeah, exactly, it is. And I think there is a lot of potential because we have this very translational framework here, because we have basic research labs and so the clinical department, and everything is connected. And this foster many interesting projects. And I think it's the right place also because we have this research center that already worked with IT, and we have a genomic science center with a lot of bioinformaticians. So we have a lot of the skills that are needed to build up a project of this kind, but it's just a potential that is still to be harnessed. So the idea of the project is to provide of Science for CS project is to provide the tools and the knowledge to make our research community able to do a project which is really citizen science. And I think we can do that, but we have to build up everything we need.
So you mentioned before that the project's in its relatively early stages, just past its year kind of anniversary, kind of birthday, I suppose. You've spoken a little bit about the early stage of the project, trying to reach out to the researchers and seeing how their work can be involved with the citizen science initiatives and how you can kind of integrate these ideas together. I was just wondering, I don't know, what are the key outcomes so far, and what do you hope to achieve in the next year and beyond, really? And yeah, your main actions moving forward.
Yeah, I think that the first steps were really basic steps. So we are entering a citizen science network, the European Citizen Science Network. So this is a simple way to bring in knowledge and tools within the community. We also created a working group of a few of our researchers who already are interested in these topics and have tried to do some of these things I was telling you earlier, so that are already engaged, and they are following the project from a closer position than the wider research community. And we are setting up the first training programs for students and researchers, because we also, being a university, we also want to make some of the we want to make part of the university training, especially for because we have a faculty of philosophy and psychology, but especially for medicine starting off, and then for philosophy also, because I think there are interesting overlaps, I would say, or interesting collaboration that can be built between the faculties. But anyhow, we want to train students. So this is a part that has already started. And at the same time, we are setting up informal opportunities for interaction with researchers. So we are organizing workshops and seminars about citizen science that will start in this next year. So the next year will be for us, the main goal will be to really engage our community. In the next week, actually in this week, we will have the scientific retreat, which is an event where all the research community of San Raffaele gather together on the lake and share for a couple of days their research. And we will be there also with the project to make it more visible and to engage them. And the other points that are very important is that we will set up an institutional contact point for citizen science. So we will have inside the Open Science office a person that will be the one supporting researchers who want to use some citizen science approaches in their research. And also the research policy office is working on the adoption of evaluation criteria for researchers that take into consideration also citizen science. So these are some of the next steps we are taking. Besides this, I mean, I think one of the more difficult point of the project, which we actually discussed also during some of the workshop we had with the front runners, is that citizen science is difficult to have a top-down approach and make researchers willing to do citizen science just by forcing on them the whole idea. And that is because actually it is challenging. It is a new way of doing research. So it's not part of the project to create or to start off a citizen science research project. We are just creating all the environment that will help researchers to do citizen science. But obviously one of the key points of the project is to not only educate our researchers and give them the tools to do that, but also spark interest, you know what I mean? So this is one of the things that we will work on in the next year, which is to try to make them willing, at least a few of them, to make some serious experiment with citizen science. And so one of the points will be to work with some of them and to find a European call which is proper and try to start off a citizen science project. Because many of the time the problem is that researchers think that is expensive and just very hard, and there's nothing that comes out of it which is valuable for them. I don't know how to say it. They don't see the value in it, given all the effort that it takes. But we know that that's not true. So one of the key point of the next year will be also to change this way of thinking, I guess, and it's not going to be easy.
So I suppose kind of the initial stages of the project were to try and integrate citizen science ideals, maybe not ideals, that might not be the right word, but kind of the principles into current research and trying to add that framework there. But then also using these researchers who had then kind of had the experience of it, integrating the sort of mindsets into the current students and future researchers, so they may have these tools at their disposals when they're doing their own research in the future, and might possibly integrate these citizen science principles more organically rather than perhaps being strong-armed is a strong word, but just sort of like integrating them kind of after the fact, perhaps.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the idea. Yeah, and one of the things that we think are key is that researcher is to give the researchers the opportunity to see and to talk to some colleagues from obviously other institutions and research centers centers that are doing citizen science are doing it successfully, and that can inspire them, because it's very different if you see someone that works already in the open science area or in RRI, and he's pushing to to adopt this technique and these approaches, because some researchers think that they are driven by the values and the overall objective, but they probably think that it's not a practical way of doing research, not at the time. But we know that this is not true. We know that there are many researchers that actually do citizen science, not only because it's cool and it's great to engage citizens, and it's a new way of thinking, but because it's useful, because it reduces costs, because it allows you to scale up with data collection. So there are a number of ways, and also because, as we said earlier, citizens and patients on different topics have knowledge that actually researchers do not have. So one of the key points will be this shift in the mentality that you were talking earlier. We already saw that it will be challenging.
You talk a little bit just before about kind of having these mentors-mentee kind of relationship with researchers currently doing citizen science and then your future students. I was just wondering what the relationship's been like between the front runners and the implementing partners. I imagine you all come from quite different backgrounds and different institutes have different experiences. I'm just wondering, has it been useful kind of co-creating with lots of different facilities and people with different expertise? What's been the benefits of that?
It's been great to work with the front runners. I think it's a very interesting way of learning what to do. The idea of the project to really have this mentoring relationship between the front runners and the implementers. And it's also challenging sometimes because we are very different institutions, both in size, in the field in which we do research, and also the people involved in citizen science and open science, as you said, come from very different background. Like I have a background in science communication. I'm a physicist, so I graduated in physics. Then I studied science communication and public engagement. Now I'm working as a public information officer, and I have a different set of skills in there that are useful for citizen science. Then we have colleagues that work on on open science, on RRI, on research integrity, for people from the publication world. So there are very different, and obviously researchers themselves, especially from the other institutions, the so-called champions in citizen science, which are very useful and are very important in bringing up change, as front runners explain to us. So you have all these different backgrounds and way of thinking, and we are working in different institutions and countries, and we are trying to figure out what are the key ingredients, I would say, to really bring about institutional change. So it's not easy, but it's been very, very, very fascinating and very useful up till now, and we are really looking forward to the next steps of the project.
No, just on a separate note, I understand how you feel. I'm a zoologist that then became a science communicator and now does kind of digital marketing. It's weird how you get to these places, isn't it?
Yeah, and it is. And I want also to say that the other thing that you understand during this workshop and learning from the front runners is that there's no specific person that have all the knowledge and all the skills to useful for citizen science. And I think more broadly about, I mean, there's no specific, there's no title, to do this kind of things. And this is true both for citizen science and RRI and open science. So you have really different perspective of people coming from very different backgrounds, and they're all valuable. So I think that in the end, what we understood by looking at front runners is that the best way is to have a working group, a group of people with different skills that work together to do this kind of things, because there's no single truth in it. So that is even more challenging.
I think that's very true, because the way our REST BIOS works we do it very similar. We have our RRI mentors and our RRI mentees, but at the latest co-creation mutual working workshop, I don't know, it became more apparent that even kind of the mentors were learning stuff from the other institutes, the mentees, and just like, it turns out, everyone's learning stuff from each other because everyone's got different backgrounds and experiences. And just because the mentors did it a certain way doesn't mean that they can't learn from new inputs from the mentees. And it seems just like, there's definitely always this level of co-creation with these sort of projects, it seems.
Yeah, also because it's so new. I mean, citizen science is around a little bit, actually. The first projects were probably, 20, 30 years ago. Maybe more. It depends on how you define it. But anyhow, it's still very ongoing. And so, you're learning while you are doing it. And that's true even for the front runners. And that somehow is also helpful, because it tells you that, you can do it, even if you don't have a long experience, you will build it up in time.
I suppose that leads quite well into my final question, I suppose, which is, now that you've got through a year of being on this citizen science project, what are the main challenges and opportunities that have kind of presented themselves throughout? And if another EU project or a related project was starting up doing a similar sort of initiative, what sort of advice would you give to them?
I guess the main challenges here is the relationship with researchers. So and the relationship between a top-down and bottom-up approach. So you are at the same time trying to have a top-down approach, because you are already building the instruments, the tools, and the offices, and you're trying to train researchers. So they are suggesting what they should do, but at the same time, you want them to take the lead. And this is one of the most tricky part, I guess. But there's no easy way to do it. I mean, the opposite way is just to wait till you will be lucky enough that some of these experiments will start in your institution, so that you will have some researchers that are championing it. This is a very difficult part. And I guess that finding a small group of researchers that are really engaged can make a difference. And maybe this is something that you have to do from really the start of the project, because the more you make them feel part of it, the easier it will be, and then they will drive the community. So you have also to choose people that are able to do it, and this is one of the first challenge, I would say. The other challenge that we saw is that, and I think it would be true in any other institution that has our work mostly in biomedicine, is that when you try to engage citizens regarding health topic, there are many ethical issues that you will not find in like astronomy, or ecology. So a citizen science project in which you ask people to gather data or to analyze data that are related to health, both and especially if your subjects are patients, is going to be challenging from an ethical point of view. So you have to engage with all another set of offices and structure within your institution, and also different kind of expertise that you will not have to engage if you were in another field. And also for this point, I think that it is very important to engage from the start all the actors that are needed, and this is something that we will do, and we didn't start off doing. Obviously, it's a process, it's an ongoing process, but also this is a very challenging point, and I think it is specific of biomedicine and biomedical research centers.
I suppose that's really interesting because, when it comes to health and biomedicine, there's obviously it must be hard to do for some research. It must be hard to do research for ethical reasons, obviously A/B studies and that sort of thing. But also when collecting data, I suppose there's obviously a degree of anonymity / kind of confidentiality that comes along with that as well. So must present some interesting challenges when integrating citizen science into it.
Yeah, I think it's not a issue that cannot be resolved. Obviously, but to be resolved, you have to work through it. And I think that this is another of the obstacles that keep researchers from this area of science from getting into citizen science, because it's more complicated, and you have to engage other expertise, other experts, and so it complicates everything. But again, there's a lot of potential. So it's just the point is just to start doing things in a new way, and not in the status quo, where obviously you don't have these tools, so you don't have the regulatory framework and everything. You have to build up all from scratch, I would say. So that's a challenge.
Thank you for joining us today, Nicola.
Thank you for inviting us. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure's all ours. Thank you very much. The ResBIOS project is funded by the EU with the grant number 872146. To learn more about the ResBIOS project and the other pillars of RRI, please go to resbios.eu. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.